Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zolotech, and iOS 18 releases to the public very soon this Monday. It's go time for Apple, where they're going to release a ton of updates with iOS 18, iPadOS 18, watchOS 11, tvOS, HomePodOS, visionOS updates, macOS updates, and much more, even iOS 17.7 to older devices. So we'll have that on Monday, and I thought we'd talk about some more features that have been found since the iOS 18 RC is out what's new video. We'll also talk about the experience now that we basically have the final version as far as developers and beta testers. I've been using both 18 and 18.1 on iPhone 15 Pro Max. We'll also talk about your experience based off the YouTube community poll. At the time of this video, there's over 19,000 votes and 283 comments. We'll take a look at some of the comments with your experience toward the end of the video. Now, the first thing is, Apple actually announced new features with AirPods this week at the Apple event. Along with the iPhone 16 announcement, they announced that AirPods Pro 2 would actually gain a new feature with hearing health updates. It allows them to be used for hearing tests as well as hearing aids. Apple actually was granted this update from the FDA where they approved it, and now they can go forward with those features. It's not yet in the beta. There was actually an update this past week, or it's not in the RC, so we'll probably see that maybe with iOS 18.1 or a small update in between. There was an AirPods update this week I covered, and it's not included there. If we go into the AirPods settings, of course, you can see all of the new changes here, along with the different menu for audio with personalized volume and adaptive audio, and updates where you can nod your head using head gestures to answer or decline a call, notification, and more. So we're getting a lot of features. That hearing update should be coming soon, though. Apple also announced Apple Intelligence back in WWDC 2024. It launches with different features with an updated Siri and much more, but one thing we haven't seen is the image playground, which can generate images. Craig Federighi at Apple, he's the head of software at Apple, posted an image and it looks like his dog with a little birthday hat on it, and this is something that we'll be able to generate on our own once we get image playground. Hopefully we get that with maybe beta 4 or a little bit later on. One other thing to note with iOS 18 is Apple has apparently locked the internal components to the phone themselves. iOS 18 is sort of locking more components to the individual phone, trying to deter theft of the phone. So that's their reasoning behind it. You will be able to change out parts on your own using some of their tools apparently, and they've made replacing the battery in the iPhone 16 easier to comply with the EU. So with all of those things, hopefully it's easier to maybe modify or change your device, but we'll have to wait and see as iOS 18 brings more restrictions as far as that goes. One thing I wanted to mention before we talk about a few other features is Siri actually had an issue this week for many. Some people, whether they're on iOS 18 or 18.1, if you went into your Apple Intelligence settings, actually started to see Siri download. Even if you didn't have it, some saw some downloads for Siri, and then all of a sudden it wouldn't work. We had an update here. It would get stuck at 99%. Typically restarting fixed it, but then if we went into Siri, it would say it was unavailable right now. So that's something that was updated on its own. It just started working today. It actually didn't work for the past few days for me. So Apple probably fixed it on the server side, but it is an issue a lot of people had. Now, if you're running iOS 17, just like last year, you'll be able to stay on iOS 17.7 or iOS 17 updates, at least for a little while with security updates. So if you want to actually stay on this version, this is on 17.6.1. On Monday, Apple will also launch iOS 17.7 as the RC is out right now. Once they launch that, you'll be able to stay on that if you want to for a while. You won't have to go to iOS 18 if you don't want to, but so far it's actually looking like a pretty decent update as far as overall performance and more that we'll take a look at a little bit later on. But overall, it seems like a good update, but if you want to stay on iOS 17 updates, you should be able to do that at least for some time. Now, in the European Union, there's going to be a new feature soon with iOS 18 or iPadOS 18. Just like we had with the iPhone earlier this year, the iPad is gaining third-party app stores and third-party apps. So that's something that's actually launching with iOS 18 and iPadOS 18, and you'll be able to use that very, very soon if you want to. So those of you that have been wanting to use some of those third-party app stores with Fortnite and maybe the Epic Game Store, you'll be able to do that. Just this past week, Apple actually posted a new update on their website about iOS 18 with all the latest features in a PDF. In this PDF, they announced different Apple Intelligence features, plus everything included with iOS 18, about 250 or more features. However, one of the things they mentioned has to do with iCloud Mail. Just like on the iPhone, we're supposed to get an update soon for Mail. maybe a new app with the iPhone itself, and in iCloud, the actual Mail app will now have the option for new cleanup features. You'll be able to delete older email based on time, and you'll easily be able to unsubscribe and delete email. We're not seeing it just yet, but it's something that looks like it's coming up very, very soon. With the launch of the new iPhone 16, you'll be able to record in 4K 120 frames per second and then adjust that later on. Apple's actually brought some of those features to iOS 18 with older devices. If we go into photos and we have maybe a video that was recorded at a higher frame rate, this is of the Vision Pro that I recorded, tap this new little option in the upper right that looks like a timer or a clock, and we can change the frame rate playback speed anywhere from 240 frames per second down to 24 frames per second. So if we want to change that to match whatever we'd like, we can then change it and see the video in that speed. So it's great that they're including this option on older devices as well. Something else they're updating with iOS 18 has to do with if you change out your battery and you're not using a genuine battery. Apparently now you can get optimized charging even if it's not an Apple authorized battery. When it comes to the overall experience of the latest updates, iOS 17.6.1 seems to be decent but still has some issues. However, iOS 18 RC or release candidate, as long as it's the final version, is looking pretty good. For the most part, most people say it's much smoother. After you install the RC coming from beta 8, most people say that it's much faster going into different apps and just sort of scrolling. The overall ProMotion is super fast and smooth, and just the overall experience in general seems to be much better. So I definitely think they've improved this. We'll take a look at benchmarks later on, and it seems like they definitely have, and battery life as well. So the overall experience still has some bugs here and there. I'll see occasional frame rate drops in different apps, or maybe if we go in, we'll play this song here. We'll hit play, swipe home. You'll see it's nice and smooth there. From time to time, you'll see some odd frame rate drops, but for the most part, it's been very smooth and really great to use. Even on older devices, people are saying the same thing. So the overall experience of this so far seems to be very, very good. iOS 18.1 Beta 3 definitely needs an update at this point. I've had horrendous battery life. Again, we'll check that a little bit later. But in general, 18.1 Beta 3 feels like using maybe Beta 7 or Beta 8 of iOS 18. It definitely can use an upgrade, and it gets very hot when you're using Apple Intelligence. So there's some changes that are needed. Of course, I would expect that with a recent update. So maybe we'll see that soon. I have not used iOS 17.7, so we'll have to wait and see what that's like. Those will be for people that don't want to upgrade to iOS 18 though, since iOS 18 supports everyone that's running iOS 17. So if you don't want to upgrade to it, you won't have to, as I mentioned earlier. Now, as far as releases, before we talk about bugs, well, Apple had quite a few releases this week. The first one actually has to do with iOS 18.1 Beta 3, but they released it just for iPhone 16 models. So all of the 4 16 models with 16, 16 Plus, 16 Pro, and 16 Pro Max got that update this week if they wanted to install it. Apple also updated Safari Technology Preview again. And on that website, you can see here, if we scroll down, we have version 203. So they update this every couple of weeks, it seems. It's available for macOS Sequoia and macOS Sonoma to test out the latest features. Apple also updated AirPods Pro 2 with the latest firmware for all the features I mentioned earlier. And then iOS 18 will launch on September 16th. So we're not far off now. We're going to have that release. So Apple's, I'm sure, very busy and working on everything else to get it ready for the launch. iOS 18.1 Beta 4 could probably be maybe Tuesday. Hopefully we'll see that soon with some new features, maybe Image Playground, but I would expect an update soon as it's been a little while. But I suspect they're probably waiting until the maybe launch of iOS 18 before they release that. Maybe they're even waiting for the iPhone 16 launch that takes place on the 20th. So based off what they've done before, that's what I would expect. We could see another iOS 17 update, but I wouldn't expect anything like that. Maybe 17.8 betas or anything. I would expect maybe iOS 18.2. Hopefully we're not running 2 separate betas again, but we'll have to wait and see what Apple does. And then in October, we're actually waiting for new Macs. So we do expect another event or press release with some updated Macs and iPads. Now, as far as overall bugs, well, for the most part, it seems to be fairly bug-free for most people. On maybe iOS 18.1, we see more of them with home overlapping on some widgets, icons defaulting to light icons, but that happens every time you change a wallpaper. We also might still have a standby issue. However, I haven't heard a single person with that issue so far. So for me, it seems to be working great on iOS 18. So let's go ahead and check it out here. There we go. We'll just lock the device, give it a second to go into standby mode. We're in, and let's see if we can go in and modify it. So let's see if we can press and hold. It unlocks, and then we could switch between whatever we want. So maybe we want the clock here, press and hold. We can go back in and modify it. You get some nice haptic feedback, and then we're back in nice and smooth. So I really think they've worked out the bugs with this. The wallpaper dimming bug is apparently intentional. However, I still have a hard time believing that, as it really modifies your wallpaper overall. So if we get rid of all these here and swipe home, it sort of dims or desaturates your wallpaper a little bit. I really wish they would change this back, as I really don't like this behavior, but it's something that they said apparently is meant to be this way, at least according to a viewer. The other thing is CarPlay is not connecting for some people. It depends on the vehicle you have. I haven't had an issue with it whatsoever, but a few people have mentioned that. Overall battery life, let's take a look at iOS 18, as I did run this a little bit. Let's go to battery health. We're at 100% with 54 cycles. And if we go and take a look at the battery itself, yesterday I used this a lot. I used about 65% of the battery and had 4 hours and 31 minutes of screen active time, 3 hours and 22 minutes of screen idle time. Overall, it seems to be pretty good, and it's getting most people through the day better than iOS 17.6.1. With iOS 18.1 Beta 3, my battery health has gone down a little bit more, 91% at 302 cycles. And if we go back to the last 10 days, yesterday I used about 65% of the battery and only had 1 hour and 18 minutes of screen active time, 3 hours and 39 minutes of screen idle time. It does not get me through the day most of the time. In the day with 4 hours and 53 minutes, it was on the charger as well. So it's definitely not getting me through the day. Performance, though, seems to be pretty good on both of them. However, iOS 18 is just super smooth for the most part with no issues like I mentioned before. So the overall experience is quite good with performance, and the same is true with the overall heat. In fact, both of them are nice and cool right now, and iOS 18.1 will heat up very quickly if you go into Photos and try and use Apple Intelligence. But let's take a look with the thermal camera. With iOS 18 RC, at the hottest point, we're around 31.2 degrees Celsius. On iOS 18.1, we're actually a little bit cooler as it hasn't been in use, but at about 30.5 degrees Celsius. Unless I start using Apple Intelligence, it actually stays nice and cool overall. So in general, it's staying pretty decent. Like I mentioned, iOS 18 seems to be a vast improvement over the previous beta for me. When it comes to overall benchmarks, well, I did run those on each one of these devices. Let's take a look. Now, keep in mind, the scores on the left reflect an older processor with the iPhone 15 Plus. Then we have two 15 Pro Maxes running iOS 18 RC and iOS 18.1 Beta 3. iOS 18 RC is doing quite well. It's higher than all of them for single core and higher than all of them for multi-core. So I think that's a great sign. It'll probably continue to improve as the time goes on and we get to use these more. Maybe we'll even have an update to Geekbench to better test this as well if it needs it. Now let's take a look at some of your comments and see how it's going for you. Colin1.c said, "Dear Zollotech, my name is Colin and I've been using iOS 18 RC on my iPhone 13 mini. And the experience is great, but Apple Music keeps crashing on me ever since beta 5 or 6. But the battery life at 94% battery health, I could get up to 6.5 hours of screen on time, 7 out of 10. Thank you for reading and take care." Joshua Sangalo said, "iOS 18 RC is amazing and very smooth, and the battery is great on my iPhone XR. But some of the games can be a bit laggy sometimes, and my camera in portrait can sometimes not detect a person when taking a photo. But other than that, everything is great. Love your videos. Thank you." George Enticott said, "iOS 18 on standard iPhone 15 with AirPods Pro 2 and Apple Watch. Best update in years. I can pick up the AI stuff later. Stable, large icons, good battery, keeps me healthy." Stendy483 said, "iOS 18 RC on my 128GB iPhone 15. Noticing a lot of hangups and lag, particularly in the Photos app. Phone became unresponsive for several seconds while simply scrolling through my pics. Never had that happen on previous betas." TTS292 said, "It's doing pretty great so far on my iPhone 11, and I haven't experienced any bugs. Battery life has been perfect, and I've also gone all day without having to charge my phone, except for midnight. Overall, I'm excited for iOS 18 to be released to the public. even though I'm running the RC version. Bugsy says iOS 18.1 keyboard has been glitchy, randomly reboots, and battery life is significantly worse this week. Whenever on Twitter, battery drains almost 5 times faster than normal. Flan2 says, I'm on iOS 18.1 Beta 3 on my iPhone 15 Pro Max, and I absolutely have no complaints. It gets me through the day. With my charging limit set to 80%, I'm getting around 6 to 9 hours. Bugs are there, like every 40 Siri side button requests, it just doesn't render, but apart from that, it's pretty stable. So that's everything with iOS 18 RC, and if you're wondering if you should install iOS 18 RC now or wait until Monday for iOS 18's public release, I definitely could recommend it, as I think it's better than iOS 17 was at this point, but there's still some bugs that need to be worked out. The most stable versions are usually iOS 18.1 or 18.2 when they come out a little bit later on. So if you're concerned about that, you could hold off, but if you're on iOS 18 betas already, definitely install it if you haven't already. We could see a new build number. In fact, I'd be surprised if we don't, as Apple continues to work on it. So we could see a new build. That means if you're on a beta other than 18.1, you could have another update, but we won't know that until Apple releases it. iPhone 16 launches on September 20th, this coming Friday, and I'd love to hear from you if you're actually pre-ordering one, what size you picked up, and what color you chose this year. Some people love desert titanium, others prefer natural titanium, black or white. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below which one you actually chose. Of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.